May 5, 1943, North Atlantic 53 used north 35 rigs west, wind 7 on the Beaufort scale, a smear of low cloud, and a sea that hammers steel like a blacksmith's mallet. On the bridge wing of a grimy X2 is C1 freighter, one of those slow Liberty ships. Chief Mate William Hobbs leans into the gale, oilskin snapping, binoculars salted white. Below him, Number 3 hold thumps as hull plates flex and remember the welds that bound them in an American yard just months ago. 11 knots in a world that wants you dead. They call it ONS 5. Outbound north slow. 50 ships caged in by corvettes and destroyers, zig-zagging southwest of Greenland, beneath a dark so deep your ears must learn to see. Aft, the Liberty's Earlicon crew, kids with borrowed whiskers, cradle 20 Maremers magazines and stamp their feet for warmth. The ship's triple expansion engine drives a steady, stubborn beat through the deck. Thrum, 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 a heartbeat audible from keel to masthead. Around them move shapes one moment, then vanish the next. Tanker, freighter, collier, each following the dim glow of the ship ahead like pilgrims staring at a moving star, 60 feet under and 10 miles out. Someone else is listening. Oberleutnant C. Martin Hewer, 24, gray-eyed and thin as a violin string, rests one gloved hand on the shoulder of his soundman inside a Type V boat that smells of wet metal, diesel, and old coffee. The rubber ear cups press a world of noise into the man's skull propellers. Cavitation, the soft crush of sea on steel. Hewer has heard the jokes. Langsome, hey slick, slow and ugly, veterans said in Lorient, snorting into their beer steins about these American boxes with funnels. The Liberty ships were, to men like him, the sea's lumbering cattle. Easy meat, if you could slip past the shepherds. But 1943 has been different. A twinge of unease prickles his neck as he scans the chart, the wolf pack ahead. Star, Fink, Amsel has been battered for days. Signals are strange, responses slower. Shore radio relays warnings about aircraft pressing farther and farther into what should be boat water, centimetric radar. The rumor goes. Wavelengths that can find even a periscope feather. Memavrichen, one of his petty officers mutters. Fairy tales, Hewer isn't sure. Up where the wind lives. Camber, a Royal Navy corvette, modeled in Western approaches dazzle, rides the swells like a cork with teeth. Lieutenant Commander James Cutter, Ranvier, grips the railing of his open bridge. Eyes rimmed red, the FADF operator, Huff, Duff, has just handed him a bearing. A short, clipped burst from a U-boat commander calling his pack. They catch them that way now, triangulating chatter in seconds. You can almost feel the line drawn in the air somewhere on that bearing. Under this hateful sea. A man signs his own ruining with Morse. Bring us 10 degrees to starboard. Keep the sets warm, Cutter says, voice flat with fatigue. The ASDIC operator below hums to himself, sending out pings that stitch the night with invisible thread on Camber's forecastle. Sailors stand by the Hedgehog spigot mortar. 24 stubby tubes clustered like a buquite of iron, no depth, charge geyser if they're on. Only a low cough and, if fortune smiles, a series of dull, padded thumps as contact fuses bite metal and the sea closes over a killing. Back in the Liberty's radio shack, sparks, Seaman Second Class Danny Quinn of Cleveland tunes across a whispering sky and flinches as the escort group flashes an urgent signal. Darken ship, air cover expected by dawn. He lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. They've heard about the big liberators with the strange eyes in their bellies. ASV centimetric radar and beams of white light that turn night to daylight before the guns stitched the sea with fire, brought the first Leigh Light horrors to the Bay of Biscay. Now the B-24s range far out of Iceland, carrying cold daylight in their guts. If one of those shows up before the U-boat's close, maybe you live to curse the coffee again. Hewer's helmsman murmurs a correction. The boat smears through a layer of warmer water. Hewer watches the stopwatch around his neck swing with the roll, counting the convoy's rhythm. He pictures the column spacing 6 cables. Perhaps, then a laggard at the outside edge. That's his man, the Liberty with the erratic wake. Head slow, bring us to periscope depth. The electric motors answer like cats stretching. Hewer's mind flicks through the torpedo board. 4 eels forward, one with a magnetic pistol, the rest contact. T3s. He hates relying on magnets. The Atlantic's moods play hell with them, but a magnetic under a fat freighter's keel. The sound you never forget. Cutter's Corvette crosses the convoy's van and feels the ocean's mood shift the way a farmer feels weather in his knuckles. The ASDIC bearing is stale now, but his gut, trained by 2 winters of black water and white spray, says the contact is still close. Hold the zig. Don't spook them. He orders, letting the convoy's doctrine play out like a book he can recite sweep-wide. Heard the wolves, the men on the forecastle stamp and grin through chattering teeth, half from cold, half to drive out the itch behind the ribs that starts when you think about the first thump on the hull, on the Liberty's bridge. Hobbs thumbs the chart table with a grease-blackened finger. He knows his ship like a man knows his gate. She's fresh from a yard that produced one of her sisters in 4 days from keel to launch. An impossible rumor that ran across docks from Baltimore to Portland. His own was a 12-day wonder with a nameplate that still smells of varnish. Ugly, yes, graceful as a brick. But she's held out from New York to John's and now into the froth and claws of the North Atlantic. He thinks about the riveters, women with bandanas and broad shoulders, swinging hammers that set these plates, and the old triple expansion engine that refuses to die because old things keep ticking when new ones sulk. At 02 to 11, the convoy breathes in unison. The wind dips. A swell rolls long and slow and lifts every hull at once. In that heartbeat of unnatural stillness, Hewer raises the periscope. A cold ring of air kisses his eye. He sees it, a black mountain with a freighter's wrists, foaming shoulders, a bridge like a squint, a Liberty laden deep, range vast 200 meters and closing. Hewer adjusts, draws a quick pencil sketch against the scope's graticule, and murmurs to the torpedo officer, 2 forward, spread narrow, 1 magnetic set deep. Fewer. The boat jolts, then settles, freed of weight and suddenly thinner. Hewer keeps the scope up 1 second too long, long enough to see a wink of movement where no movement should be. On Holmes camber, the ASDIC ping achieves a note cutter can taste, not a shadow, not thermocline nonsense. A return with a human angle to it. Stand by Hedgehog. The coxswain bellows and boots hammer. Cutter leans into the voice BP. Hard over, bring her on. The bow climbs a wave, then knifes through, lantern, lit faces blur into rain and salt. Somewhere between them, the Liberty's lookout yells. White water starboard. But the sound vanishes into wind. The ocean holds its breath again. Torpedoes are running. Green clockwork seeking lives. And the line of convoy ships is a hand poised above a piano. The convoy hangs on that inhaled second, and then time rips. Hewer's torpedo officer counts softly. Zen, noon, act, while pencil ticks mark the running time on a greaseboard. The Type V's bow trims a fraction heavy, responding to his whisper for a few more meters of depth. In his throat, Hewer keeps the cadence of the sea, so he won't hear his own heart. On the Liberty's bridge, Hobbs plants his boots wide, just as the lookout's warning dies in the gale. He sees the corvette's bow cut white flame from the black and feels the old reflex tug at his hands. Turn out of column. Make yourself a harder target. But doctrine is doctrine. Escorts own the fight. He clamps down on the wheel and lets the ship's slow lungs keep breathing. Thrum, 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 while he listens for the one sound every merchantman fears, that hollow metallic cough of fate finding steel. Contact. Firm! The ASDIC man aboard AM's camber sings the range, his voice tight, wired. Lieutenant Commander Cutter leans over the canvas windbreak, and the sea knifes needles into his cheek. The bearing holds steady. A predator's mistake. Stand by to fire. He calls, and the gun captain on the forecastle answers with a thumbs up slick with rain. The Hedgehog's 24 blunt-nosed bombs look ridiculous and child-simple from 10 feet away. Like pepper shakers for a giant, they're tuned for one thing only, to meet metal and bite. Below, Hewer risks one last taste of the periscope view. Nothing now but a slab of night and blown spindrift, and clamps it down. Link rudder! Down 15. The helmsman obeys. The boat responds with that liquid that fills a submariner's dreams long after his sea days are done. The torpedo officer murmurs, veer, dray, zway. And in that breath the Atlantic decides. The Liberty's midships lifts an inch. Then the sea under her feet thumps with an invisible fist. Not a clean, cinematic break, but a muffled gut. Deep punch as one G-7 runs just beneath and detonates against pressure, sending a hard shiver through plates and framing. Hobbs's fingers whiten on the rim of the chart table. Somewhere below, a steam line bleats. Somewhere aft, a lantern goes out. A man swears by a god he hasn't visited since New Jersey. Hold her. He barks, steadying the helmsman's trembling elbow. Another second, another, and then a second thump, this time distant. The magnetic set finding a different prey or losing its nerve in the Atlantic's caprice. No column shatters, no detonation kicks the ship's spine in two. Luck, angles, and old iron. On Camber's bow, the Hedgehog crew feels the coxswains turn through their joints. The captain's hand comes down. Fire! The spigot launcher coughs in a cluster of dry pops, and the bombs arc away in a fat oval pattern, falling ahead of the ship to meet the place where mathematics says a steel cylinder must arrive in 10 heartbeats. They enter the water without drama. No Hollywood. Only the sense of dice rolling under black cloth. Hewer hears the first splashes before the forward plainsman finishes his call. Instinct screams 2 orders at once. He splits the difference. Back emergency! Starboard 20! Trim! The depth gauge's needle hesitates, then slides. The sea tightens, a cold fist closing. The first Hedgehog charges sink past without a word. The sonar operator's world turns to taps and ghost knocks, each one a mile wide in the imagination. Hewer clenches his jaw, willing the boat to be a smaller thing than it is, a sliver in a cathedral. On the Liberty's well deck, Danny Quinn jolts against the radio table and slaps his hand down on the emergency key, ready to spit QQQ if they take a second hit. The set is alive with clipped calls from other escorts' bearings, codes, a cold semaphore of hunters' talk. He hears a name through the static. Snowberry. Another corvette sliding to port to screen the outer column. Camber's ASDIC sings again. Range closing, target crossing the attack line. Cutter's mind maps it as if chalked on a slate of the U. Boat turned to evade, offered a flank. Reload Hedgehog. He snaps, then softer to no one. Stay on, you bastard. The next volley lands with a different sound. Closer, a rain of coins hitting a tin roof just beyond the wall. For a half-second, nothing. 3 low, meaty thumps in a staggered rhythm ensued. Thud, thud, no geyser, no light. But the bridge crew can feel it in their molars' contact. The only kind that matters. 1 deck down. A rivet leaps from a seam and skitters like a firefly along Hewer's chart table. He does not look at it. The lights hiccup and the boat lurches as something aft complains in a deep animal groan. The soundman's eyes go big and still. Shaden em heck, someone breathes. Damage aft. Hewer tastes rust and oil at the back of his throat. Halt, thief, he orders, but the depth needle wobbles. Heavy somewhere you don't want it heavy. He thinks of his torpedoes running, perhaps hitting nothing, perhaps taking a stranger to the bottom, and hates that he cannot know. Cutter sees foam boil to starboard. The Hedgehog impacts do this, lift a skin of ocean, as if something large turned over in sleep. He does not allow himself the word kill. Mark bearing. Drop pattern. The after-deck team sends a 5. Charge spread hissing into the wake. Old habit alongside new science. Stitching the path where a wounded boat might try to slither. Depth charges bloom in thunder far astern, ing and confusing rather than announcing victory. Camber's stern lifts and the screw bites air before the swell swallows it back down. The convoy stumbles but does not panic. A tanker to port gives a long whale belly moan. A freighter astern steadies on. Snowberry ghosts along the screen like a house cat with bloody whiskers. Hobbs's Liberty steadies back to her rhythm. He palms the bulkhead with a guilty pat. As if the ship were a living thing he'd ask too much of. Damage report. He calls. Minor pipe burst in the galley. Sir, no flooding. Comes the sing-song reply through a tinny speaker. The men on the Ehrlichans stare at the Black Sea, and the gale rips steam from their mouths like smoke. In the Type V stern, a valve clatters and half seats, and the boat answers by trying to sit down in the water. Pumpin'. Hewer snaps, the crew's ballot begins. Men moving through tight metal in practiced knots. Hands finding levers in the dark like a pianist finds notes. Diesel stink hangs in the air like an old argument. Boat lives. Hurt, but alive, Hewer considers surfacing to run. Madness with escorts a stone's throw. But then a noise threads the ocean that has not belonged this far out. This often until this spring, it begins as a rumor through bone, a slow, distant growl that rides the wind and the waves until it becomes a thing with weight. 4 engines in agreement, Hobbs straightens first. Cutter's head tilts a degree. Even Hewer, buried under meters of North Atlantic, feels it somehow. The way a violin feels a marching band through its case, the Liberator is coming down the weather, nose lit only for God. Somewhere up there is centimetric glass that sees like a cat and a cold, caged sun waiting to switch on. Air cover. Cutter says, letting out a breath he didn't know he had kept since Iceland fell behind them. He turns the Corvette to meet the new geometry of the hunt. On the Liberty's bridge, men whoop without sound, throats too tight for it. Below, in Hewer's red night, the depth gauge trembles and a single drop of condensation falls from a pipe onto his knuckle like a bell. May 5th, 1943, south of Iceland, cloud base ragged at 800 feet, rain stitching the air into gray curtains. A very long-range Liberator, coastal command colors dull in moonless dark, leans into the wind like a great, patient bird. In the left seat, Flight Lieutenant Allen, Buster. Robson keeps one hand loose on the yoke and the other wrapped around a thermos cap. The cockpit smells of damp wool and hot electrics. Beside him, Flying Officer Mk.III watches the artificial horizon steady, fragile line. Behind the flight deck, the radar operator, Pilot Officer Harjit Singh, hunches over the ASV Mk.III scope, the new centimetric set, reading the grainy, crawling light of the ocean rendered into phosphor freckles. Sweep 1 complete. 2, stand by, Singh murmurs. Accent a clip blend of Amritsar and Aberdeen, the voice of technology slipping a noose around the old ocean. The Liberator's belly is crowded with purpose. Twin Leigh light lamps nested in the fairing, a throat of depth charges fitted with hydrostatic pistols set shallow and rolled in blankets like a dangerous saint, a crated Mk./24 mine. A secret with a propeller and ears that will one day soon listen for screws and go to them. Tonight, doctrine says depth charges. The sea is wild. The target's nervous, and surprise is king. Convoy ahead, sir. FFVODF bearing lines converged on this grid. They've stirred a hornet's nest. The wireless operator calls forward. Robson nods, eyes flicking to his fuel calculations. The Vor's gift is time. Long legs that push past yesterday's limits. Tonight they can keep a hand over the convoy long enough to let ships breathe. He nudges the B-24 down through Scud, holding 150 knots, trading altitude for stealth. Singh stiffens on the scope. A bright pip crawls where no pip was a moment before. Steady, not a wave spike. 10-centimeter eyes don't care about chaff or sea clutter the way old sets did. Contact, range 1,700 yards, bearing red 20. Robson doesn't ask how good he feels. He can hear it in the radar man's breath. Let's see the gentleman, he says. The navigator, Flight Sergeant Baines, peels back a chart overlay, marking a quick crab cross where math says steel must be. In the sea below, another U-boat. Not Hewer's battered V, but a sibling from the same wolf pack. Comes up like a ghost, just enough to breathe. The captain has timed it between sweeps, between escorts, between fate's palpitations. Men in oilskins slither through the conning tower hatch, salt-stiffening beards in an instant. Flak gun crews crank elevation wheels with gloved hands gone clumsy with cold. The boat's commander, Captain Lieutenant Skulls, tilts his head to the wind and hears only wind. He gambles on a quick charge cycle and a new attack run. The convoy is so close he can smell coal through the rain on the Liberty's bridge. Hobbs hears the ocean change key. It happens sometimes. Pressure, wind, a wave set turning. Yet tonight it feels like a curtain about to lift. Cutter on camber feels it too. He motions a signalman to send up 2 quick lampshade flashes to the other escort's aircraft inbound. The convoy's shapes hunker down, men bowing into the weather as if in prayer. Radar bright and steady, strong return, now broadening. Singh reports. He's up. He's on the surface. Robson levels the Liberator into the wind, trimming with smooth, exact motions. Gunners stand to bomb. Aimer, you're on. In the nose. Sergeant. Nibs. Atkinson slides forward under the perspex, cheeks lit a soft witch, green by the bomb panel, hands poised over toggles he can find in his sleep. The bomb bay doors whine open, letting a colder night claw up inside the aircraft. Robson eases the Liberator into the run, keeping the radar bearing true with minute-yaw corrections while the navigator's voice counts down drift and distance. He tastes the old fighter pilot's enemy, target fixation, and smears a smear of spit on the windscreen out of habit, making an aiming point that only ever worked in stories. Lay light-armed, Mk.III says, thumb hovering. The big lamp switches safe. Guarded with wire he has already snapped. On my call. Robson answers, letting the dark be their cloak until the last second. Skulls senses them by absence, the way a night can grow quiet. Just before danger writes its name in light, he's not first tour. Flyger? He barks, and the 20 mm crew on the platform swing through arcs, eyes hurt by rain, and the ship's own pale instrument glows. Down a little. He tells the helmsman, balanced between lungs and lungs. The Atlantic slaps at the casing with impatient hands. The Liberator breaks cloud at 500 feet. Rain scoring the perspex like nails on glass. The pip on the scope thickens, gains a small comet's tail wake. Now, Robson says, voice like a door latch. Mk.III flicks the guard, hits the switch, and the world below becomes noon. The Leigh light burns the night out of the sea. A hard, white disk that freezes the U-boat's conning tower and gun crew in a tableau. You can see faces. Astonished, furious, human. You can see spray, each drop a bead. For a half heartbeat, even the wind seems to stop to watch. Then all of it moves at once. Skulls' flak wakes, angry red, orange nails clawing at the sky. Tracers reach and fall short, then reach and find the Liberator's paint. The top turret answers. Short, disciplined bursts sowing through night. But Robson is already beyond gunnery. Hold her. He tells his own hands, as if they belong to someone else. Atkinson calls the run. Steady, steady, mark. No. For depth, charges tumble like heavy thoughts, staggered to walk across the target's next seconds. In the same breath, Robson shoves the yoke and hauls the big plane into a climbing turn, presenting a thin belly to the worst of the flak. The charges hit the sea with 4 white fists. A half-second counts longer than a life. Then the ocean heaves not with one great cinematic column, but with a bestial, sideways grunt that wrenches air and water into a single, ugly shape. The Liberator's tail kicks. Spray slams the fuselage like thrown gravel. In the light circle, the U-boat's bow cants, then rights, then cants again. As if thinking about something it would rather not think about. Hewer, still below, and bruised by Camber's earlier kisses, does not see the light, but he hears the conversation of bombs far away. 1, 2, 3, 4. In a code he knows too well, the sound steps cross the water and arrive in his hull as a rumor of endings. He closes his eyes for one impossibly long blink and pictures the other man, the other captain, up there, doing the same math, feeling the same dread, loving the same stubborn, hateful machine. Second run. Mk.III asks, but Singh speaks before Robson can. Radar lost. No intermittent. Contact submerged. Turning. Robson breathes once deep, then lets it go. We've bloodied him. Escorts will finish the dance. He toggles the light off. The ocean swallows its own glare, night gulping back what day had stolen. Over the intercom, the rear gunner laughs once. A sound halfway between relief and shock. In the nose. Atkinson eases his forehead against cool glass. On the surface, Scalz's boat slides under, wounded in places he will only name later if later comes. He orders silent running with a voice that surprises him by being calm. His engineer's hands find the right valves because they always have. The flak crew tumbles inward. Hatches banging like coffin lids. The sea closes and the light goes away. And the dark does what dark is made to do. Signal the escorts. Bearing and last fix. Robson tells the wireless, "We'll sweep east and then back. The convoy gets our shadow until fuel says otherwise." He glances once at the instruments arrayed like church windows. The needles hold steady. Out on the wing, ice traces a dentist's pick line along the leading edge. And a single drip forms on a patent mast's lip and will not fall. Below, the Liberty rides a little higher, or perhaps Hobbs only imagines it. He hears the airplane before he sees it, then catches a black cruciform against a darker sky, gone in a blink. He allows himself one thought not in any handbook. Thank God for factories that build wings as fast as they build keels. Cutter swings camber toward the Liberator's last light and feels the night change a fraction again. From Prague. Contest.